start with a reflection. Seated comfortably, I immediately take my attention from where it often is, which is looking outwards, looking out through the windows of the eyes to the physical world. I turn it now inwards. I don't have to necessarily close the windows of the eyes, but it's literally like turning inwards in my house, looking inside into my inner world of thoughts and feelings, attitudes, perceptions, experiences, memories. And the easiest thing to observe in my inner world is my thoughts. So I start to watch the flow of thoughts in my own mind. It takes a while, a minute or two, because I'm maybe not used to watching my own thoughts. Again, I'm so used to looking outwards. So I am patient, allow myself time to watch my own thoughts. Constant flow. Sometimes the thoughts are coherent, and sometimes they're not. Just observing the flow. And considering each thought to be like a brush stroke on a canvas. Every thought I create, creating an impression on the canvas, each thought having its own color, its own texture, its own vibrancy, creating an experience as it's placed on the canvas of my inner world. And after a while, I pay more attention to the state of the canvas than the brushstrokes. The idea of thinking before I think. What is the state of my canvas? The space in which I create those thoughts or place those thoughts. Is the canvas clear? Or did it have previous impressions on it? Is it smooth? Or is it unsettled, wrinkled? Every artist, before they create, make sure the canvas on which they place those impressions is clean and clear, a good medium on which to paint an experience. It's nice to take a moment or two to think before I think, to create a calm, uncluttered, clear space inside, neutral, on which I will place my thoughts. Om Shanti. So welcome again to Inner Fitness. The topic is preparation. And it seems an odd topic for, for this inner endeavor, but it's actually incredibly important. Sometimes we call it laying the foundation, preparing the space. Even when it comes to something like meditation, we often recommend to souls that they prepare or create a space where they will use only for meditation. So it can be just a tiny space. Some have put it in their closet because they want the space to be just for meditation. It's a place where they're less likely to be disturbed, and they'll make sure it's very simple and clear, only a few objects to help focus. So they're starting to prepare a space that will support the activity of, in this case, meditation. Preparation is huge. And anyone in a creative endeavor, artist, they spend a lot of time on this idea of preparation. There is a reason, though, that we tend to skip over preparation, and I'm sure you're aware of what that might be. But sitting here now, given how important preparation is, and we'll talk about it more, why do you think someone might just start doing something before taking the time to create a space in which they can do it or ensure they're in the state that is ideal for the activity they're going to engage in? So the example might be the cook who makes sure that the kitchen is clean, they have all the ingredients, everything's ready before they actually start to cook. Why would someone skip that step and just get into the activity right away? Any thoughts why we would skip preparation? We got a response from the ether. And the response was, we want the outcome right now. Does anyone else agree with that? Does that sound familiar? I want to get to the finish line now. And yes, we are very desire driven. We like results. They make us feel like something valuable is going on. So we'll skip the preparation and just dive right into the activity, and because we want to get across the finish line now. And I don't know why, but yesterday, computers are very clever now. If anyone does a lot of preparation, it's the masterminds behind all the online platforms. They spend, I don't know how many hours on logarithms. So they probably know more about me than I do. And so images will start to flash of things they think I want to see. And the other day, there was an image of a very well-known sprinter. She, very interesting soul. She was one of the fastest women in the world, as they're called. And she actually left the body, passed away very young, very unusual illness, actually. But she was so supportive of mentoring and inspiring young people. She was from the USA. So really inspiring them to develop themselves, to educate themselves. Quite a remarkable soul. She went by the name of Flojo. Has anyone ever heard of Flojo? Florence Joyner became Florence Griffith Joyner, but when she was younger, Florence Joyner, Flojo. And she was a sprinter. And in addition to being the fastest woman on the planet for a while, she was known, you don't all have to Google to find, but she was known for wearing very unique outfits. She was the most fashionable sprinter you will ever see. But you never got the sense that she was into, promoting. It wasn't vanity. It was an expression of personal individuality. what she really wanted people to to support within themselves, to be their own, to individual expression, to be authentic. So, anyways, I was watching her, and it has nothing to do with all of that. What I was watching was I was remembering, for anyone who has done something like sprinting, it would be absolutely insane, if not dangerous, to be racing in a 100-meter race and not do any kind of warm up. That would have been insane. If you want to pull a muscle, go ahead, do it that way. But those who were intelligent and want their to last a while, they always did that warm up. That warm up was the foundation. That warm up was as important, if not more important, than the race. And the same with the cool down, even though it's after the race, it was also very important. Both of those phases were preparation. They're very incognito. They have nothing to do, it seems, with the actual race. But without them, uh, the racing will not be anywhere near its potential. And so I remember, and it's stayed with me to this day. I was reminded this morning, I was, for health reasons, trying to keep this body going. And the staff came by and said, "Oh, how much longer are you here?" And, "Oh, I think I'll be here another hour." And, "Oh, that's great." I said, "Actually, it's just mostly stretching at this point." And for me, the amount of time I take physically doing something is usually equal to the amount of time I take to stretching. And that's always been the case. I find it's not if I have time to stretch or if I have time to warm up. That doesn't make any sense to me. The preparation is part of the execution. And do I have that attitude in every aspect of my life? Do I have that understanding? Sometimes we call it preparing the soil. That if I'm going to do gardening, for those who are gardeners out there, they know that there's two very important phases: preparing the soil before they plant the seeds, and also when the season is over, there is also some treatment of the soil. And they know that's very important. Both of those are preparation phases. So, what does this have to do with spiritual endeavor? Well, everything. Behind me, lurking behind me, one of these souls, I don't know if you can see it, I'm trying to, this is very difficult one. So right here, this one right here, Dadi Jenki, who was administrative head, spiritual head of the Brahma Kumaris until March 27th of this year, at which point she passed away. She used to say, well, she'd like to say first, don't think. She'd say that a lot. Don't think. We'll have to leave that for another session. But something she'd also suggest is think before you think. And I always really liked that phrase, think before you think. So, forgive the pun, but what do you think before you think means? To think before you think. What does that mean? We know what think before you act means, and that's also very important. That's a preparation before I act. But what would think before you think means? To consider whether this is really what I want to think about. Yeah, it could definitely. Is this really important to think about right now? Is this useful? It could be that, absolutely. To think so. It's like it's an infinite regress. I'm thinking thoughts before I think, but what are the thoughts before I think? Those thoughts before I think. Like, where does it? So yes, it could be that I need to have certain thoughts before I do the real thinking. Any other thoughts about what thinking before I think could mean? In case you're wondering, I'm not alone. They are safely away from me, the other two people in the room, but they're like having these funny looks on their faces. So in Raj Yoga, we have this term karma, which means action. And when we talk about karma, we think of karma as a gesture, a deed, something that happens through the senses. And we think of it as words I speak, but we actually include very subtle things in karma as well. We include thoughts. So thoughts are an action. They do have consequences. We get very subtle, actually. We think that your vision, your drishti, your attitudes, vritti, these are all karmas, actions that will have consequences. So if I look at the example in physical fitness, we like to lay a foundation or prepare before we add movement, right? So the athlete who warms up before they sprint, or in mind body disciplines, yoga, Pilates, etc., before you do movement, you always first lay the foundation before you move. And laying the foundation means checking my alignment. And then checking my alignment means coming into awareness. I have to be aware so I can check my alignment. So, for example, if I'm going to do, say, a push up, Jima, would you like to do a push up for us? Okay, no. Jima always says Haji. I don't understand. So before we do a push up, before we, if I said to you, do a push up, you would probably just, okay, go for it, right? But what we're trained to do is before you do any movement whatsoever, you first make sure that you are completely in the moment, present, full focus, fully aware. And then you get into what's called a high plank. You check the awareness. Are my shoulders stabilized and activated? Are my joints lined up? There's a huge checklist before you even do any movement. So there's an incredible preparation that starts very subtle. And this is the idea of thinking before you think. Before I engage in the karma of thinking, I want to check what is my alignment, what is my awareness. And we use the word consciousness. So I check, am I in what we call soul consciousness? We'll come back to that. Or am I in body consciousness? And it makes a world of difference in the quality of thoughts I will create, what alignment or consciousness I'm in. And we use the word alignment for consciousness because soul consciousness, let's start with the easy one. Body consciousness means I am completely aligned with the physical or temporal realm. So I think I am physical. I am attaching myself to physical things as a way of identifying myself. So I think I am this body, Judy, and I think I have these parents, and I own that car, and these are my clothes, and this is my sense of identity, a complete alignment. My sense of self is completely aligned or defined by the physical or temporal realm, temporary things. So you can take a moment individually and see what that would look like. The obvious place it starts is our physical name, and I'm a certain gender, and I'm completely aligning my sense of self with what is physical or temporary. That's one kind of alignment in terms of the self, and that's called body consciousness. The other alignment we call spiritual or soul consciousness is where I'm aligning my sense of self with what is eternal, not physical. So we say, I am a soul. I have these intrinsic qualities. I feel most at home in silence. So a very eternal sense of self that transcends the temporary, the ever-changing, this very constant sense of self. And it turns out that that eternal, if I can do it, if I can really align, feel this is me, it's a very free, very, very free and light experience. And it melts away many of the forces that are pressing on us when we align with the physical. Top of the list is ego, attachment, desires. Those all kind of melt away when I experience myself in a very eternal way. I become quite free. And it's amazing how differently we think when those forces are not acting on us. Otherwise, we're very reactive in our thinking. One example that you might be able to easily resonate with is the idea of being a trustee. I don't know if you ever have literally been a trustee. Parents might kind of get this idea because you've been entrusted with the care. But being a trustee, and I myself have recently come into this role of trustee on a very literal level, and it fascinates me, absolutely fascinates me, because I can see how naturally my thoughts change towards any of the resources for which I'm acting as a trustee. So, for example, let's say that I've got my car and the thoughts I have about my car. But then let's say I'm also taking care of someone else's car sitting while they're away. And how I think about that resource as a trustee, it's not mine, just a trustee, as opposed to how I think about what I consider mine. There's a difference. That's how powerful consciousness is. So when we say to think before we think, we're really saying prepare, check in. What is my consciousness? Before I create any actions, including thoughts, etc., what is my alignment? And for that, I have to be very present, very aware. So that's the deepest preparation, is just being able to come into a sense of attention or focus and presence. And when we even sit for meditation, that's our first preparation before we sort of dive into any kind of meditation or reflection. It's sort of like, okay, am I fully here? It's amazing, actually. I'm sure you've all experienced this if you do take times to meditate, that you can go on for 5, 10, 30, the entire time you're sitting and never actually launch because you're spending your whole time thinking about what you have to do. Oh yeah, I've got to do, oh yeah, I have to finish that party. The whole time you're not even here. You're kind of like, you're thinking, but I didn't take the time to prepare. I didn't take the time to lay a foundation before I launched. So I'm just kind of roaming around the countryside in my head. And I'm not, yes, I get up and I say, whoa, I sat for 60 minutes. But was the activity of the highest quality? If I took that time to prepare, was the activity of the highest quality? So it's really useful to not necessarily just sort of rush into actions, but take a moment to do the preparation. Of course, there's a very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln, who was a master of preparation. Master. I think, I don't know if he did, but I always feel he would have been a great chess player. Chess players are amazing at preparation. They're so far-sighted. They're spending so many of their moves, they're actually preparing for an ultimate move. You know, so many steps, they're preparing the soil. He would have been great at that because he really understood this concept of preparing. He was trying to make such a phenomenal, massive shift in the awareness of an entire nation. That's an incredible thing to do, to shift the beliefs, the attitudes of an entire nation. And so many of his decisions were just preparing for the shift, preparing the soil. Some would be critical, he's not doing enough, but I always felt, no, he knows what he's doing. He's preparing so that there's the best possibility that that shift will be possible, that declaration. So he had a very well-known quote where he would talk about, if he's going to cut down a tree, he's going to take 90% of his time sharpening the axe, right? Because if he takes that time to sharpen it, let's say he doesn't take any time to sharpen the axe. He just starts going at the tree with a blunt axe. How's that going to go? How long is it going to take him? How frustrating is it? How much energy is he going to put on? How inefficient is that going to be? And instead, he says, it may not look like anything's happening, but I'm going to take a lot of the time that I have allotted to sharpen the axe. And then when he goes to cut the tree, one chop. Success, highly efficient. I think that's such a powerful, it takes incredible, almost not self-discipline, but we really think of it as self-respect to give that time for preparation. Others may think you're doing nothing. They might even be critical. They might say you're slow. You're not producing results. Why are you taking so long? Doesn't matter. You know what you're doing. You know internally. You're putting yourself in the best possible position to get the highest quality results. And that takes a lot of self-respect. There was, and I know we've shared this before, but it's coming into my mind. There was a program, sorry, there was a program in Halifax. Our center in Halifax always does these very interesting, talk about preparation, these very interesting programs. They're very community oriented. And that's because they've taken so much time preparing, creating those community connections. So they were doing a program called Images and Voices of Hope. And it was at that very, I've now forgotten, is it Pier 16? No, that doesn't sound right. Very famous, so famous, I forgot the number. Pier, if you know in the chat box, where all of the immigrants came to Canada. Pier, it's a pier where the boats come, a pier, P-I-E-R. We'll Google it. I am so sorry. I'm embarrassed now. It's a very famous spot in Halifax. This is where all the immigrants came through to Canada. Pier. Anyways, it's coming. It's coming. Just so you're not going mad out there. Sorry. Pier 21. I knew it was an important number spiritually. Pier 21. Pier 16. Pier 21. So yeah. So it was at Pier 21, beautiful space, and they invited the community to come. And what they were doing, again, it's Images and Voices of Hope. So they were asking souls, and again, anyone could drop in. They had no idea who would show up, what their interests would be. Anyone could come. So they all came, and in one large group, they were told the vision of the time they would have together. It's like a workshop where they would have a chance to express what they feel is an image, an expression, really of hope, of upliftment for the community, for themselves. That's what they were going to express. And then they were divided into groups. And the groups were based on different modes of expression. So there was one group that was for writers. There were another group that was those who liked speech, like to share through speech. Another group for those who like to share through visual. Another for those who liked movement. So there were all these, one for song or music. So all these different modes of expression. And they got to self-select. They decided what group they wanted to go into. So one of the groups was movement. So you could think of it as maybe some kind of dance performance at the end. And you didn't need to be a dancer, you just need to be interested in expressing through movement. So there was the movement group, and I think they had maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours to prepare their piece, because at the end they were going to have to perform something or show something to the entire gathering uh, out of what their group had come up with. And so the movement group um, got together, and there were all the other groups, and almost immediately all the other groups started to get busy creating something to perform or show. But the movement group, which would be movement, were sitting a long time. Okay, we're sitting a long time. In fact, the other groups would look over at the movement group and go, "What are they doing? They're not even rehearsing anything. Like, what's going on over there? They're not even moving. The movement group is not moving." And they were thought, what? How's that going to work? Like, that went on for a very long time, like Abraham Lincoln long. Like, if they had an hour, like for 50 minutes, they were sitting. It was very long. And what were they sitting? What were they doing? I mean, they seemed to be talking, but no movement. And what they were doing, what the facilitator was doing, was trying to, through sharing, through conversation, get the individuals in that group to have a very deep inner experience of whatever they felt was the feeling or the qualities of upliftment, of hope, of empowerment. Again, the mission or the vision of the project, just to get them feel the qualities very authentically, just the feeling inside. And they were just facilitating that process of an inner experience. They were preparing them to move for a very long time. And when you think about it, you've even probably yourself used the expression, I saw something, I heard something, I read something, and it deeply moved me. It's a really odd experience because we're just sitting there, but we say it moved me. So it's not that it moved me physically, it didn't move the body, but it moved me, the soul, spiritually. It moved me. I was so touched. I feel like I was moved into a different space. And so that's what they were trying to do. It's very invisible, but just preparing them for outer movement through a deep, authentic inner experience. That went on for most of the time that they were together. And then just before they're going to be called back to present, just before the facility said, okay, so I guess we should prepare to show some movement. So she said, I want you each to think of, I want you to experience that quality and just let that feeling enter your limbs. And how would the limbs move to like just naturally? How would it? So they start saying, like, if their quality was peace, you suddenly saw their limbs doing things. They weren't like having to come up. It's just that feeling just came out of their limb. Love, it just started coming out of their limbs, because what their performance piece was going to be, the only thing they had to spend time on was figuring out where they were going to stand. That's all she spent time. I said, let's just create a configuration, figure out where everyone will stand so everyone can be seen, but has enough space to express. So they figured out that configuration. She said, do all of you feel deeply moved? No, and they all said, yes, no, I know what I'm going to do. Yeah, they all were very, yep, I'm good, thanks. And no one saw what they were going to do before. They just stood, knew where they would stand, and they got in front of the group at the end, all the other groups, and they may have shared, or maybe they spoke it. I'm not sure whether the facilitator spoke it or they themselves did, but they would say their quality and the movement. Or they may not have even said the quality, I have no idea, but they just one at a time did their movement. And at the end, the other groups were just absolutely in awe, because they said, okay, we saw you. We saw you sitting for almost the entire time. Where did that come from? It was absolutely stunning. Where did it come from? You didn't practice. We saw you. You did not practice. Where did this movement performance come from? Preparation always affects the quality even. So it was just such a fascinating lesson for everyone on when we take the time to prepare the soil to be in that alignment, how it really shifts the quality of what we might call the outcome or result. And quite frankly, lucky are the ones who enjoy preparation for preparation's sake. They're not they get a fruit out of the preparation. So they say, oh, whatever comes out of this is good, but I'm really enjoying, sometimes we say the journey, I'm really enjoying this preparation phase. And so to really kind of, as I sit down, because I want to get a certain level of mastery or competence over preparation. So that every time I sit for meditation, I can, in a second almost, get into that alignment, that presence and alignment. So I keep working on the preparation phase. When I sit to meditate, to reflect, do I have mastery over bringing myself into this present moment, being fully awake and aware and aligned? What is my mastery over just that before I even start thinking about puppy dogs and rainbows or whatever my meditation is going to be about? What is my space, my inner space? What state is it in? And many times we'll have reflections just on preparing the inner space, because I know that's going to determine the quality of the experience I will have. If I was going to get an operation, I'm very happy to hear that surgeons take time to prep. I would hate it if they didn't take any time to prep. They just kind of launched in. I'll end by saying, not to horrify you, but I found this a very interesting story. There was whose name eludes me because it's a language that I'm not familiar with, but European physician who was a surgeon, and he was connected to a hospital. And this hospital had a reputation. They had given it a name, actually, but it had gained a reputation that absolutely terrified mothers who were going to deliver there. They knew they'd die. There was a very high mortality rate of women who went into this hospital to deliver. A very high percentage would die. So if they were told we're going to have to send you to this hospital, they would cry. They would just say, no, please, I'd rather stay at home, but just don't send me there. I'm going to die. And sure enough, they would. So, it was breaking this physician's heart, that what was going on, and no one really could figure out what was going on or bothered to even study what might be happening there. And he was really, he was putting himself personally into such a state of distress. His quality of life was really getting quite dire because he was just absolutely pulled to figure this out. And there was so much resistance from administration because they did not want to acknowledge this problem. And he was just trying to get them to acknowledge, we have a problem, we have to address it. And they did not want to. They felt that they're very proficient physicians and surgeons, and it must be the woman's fault. These women coming in. And he just was fighting so hard. And then I believe that one year, a very, very close friend of his, um, he, this will give away what was going on if I tell you this, but I have to. Many of these physicians, oh my goodness, I forgot the name now. Nora will help me. When you do, it's not mortician, the ones who study how someone died. coroner, yeah, coroner, I guess. Um, yeah, they also were the ones that would, when someone dies, they'd have to figure out what the cause of death was. Is that a coroner? I am so not helpful to you today. Yes. So these physicians were also performing that role. And so his very close friend was in that role. And one day his close friend was performing that function and accidentally cut his finger. And then he went through a series of physical difficulties that ended up with him dying, actually. And the series of stages he went through were very similar to what these women were going through after they delivered in this hospital. And he started to link things up. And I will share this, believe it or not, there was a time when physicians did not prep for surgery. They did not understand the concept of germs. There was no understanding. It was not on their radar. I know that's hard to believe. There was no understanding that you have to prep, wash up, be completely clean. I mean, they would not survive in this pandemic. You have to be completely clean before you go and perform an operation. That concept did not exist. And so, if you can imagine, they would go and, did we find out? Okay, that they would do their coroner activities, responsibilities. So they're working on a corpse. So of course there's infection, decomposition. They would not wash their hands and immediately go and deliver a baby. Can you see what might happen there without the preparation in between, without the prep? And he figured this out. It's an obvious thing to us, but when you're dealing with an atmosphere that, as he described it, was very arrogant and did not want to admit that the fault was their own, it was very, very hard for him to convince, but he did. He showed the correlation very clearly when he was in institutions where they allowed him to pursue this concept. The morbidity went way down, mortality went way down, but he had to fight so hard. So he wasn't good actually at the preparation he needed to convince his supervisors. He really wasn't good at that preparation, so his ideas were not accepted, even though the results were quite obvious. And so this idea of prep was really, in large part, due to him. A pathologist, thank you, a pathologist. So so I did not do my prep before telling you this story. So this idea of prepping before a surgery is thanks a lot to him, actually. He was the beginnings of that. But can you imagine a surgeon not prepping before performing surgery? Yeah, even worse. You're with cadavers and then you go directly into a surgery. So the preparation was critical, absolutely critical. And if we had that same kind of feeling about preparation, the importance of it, we might help to develop a mastery of it. To this day, still teaching fitness classes, I still have people running into classes after the warm up and leaving the class before the cool down. And my heart kind of dies a little every time, knowing what the long term results of this are. But if you develop a love, those who have this love or prep, they arrive early and they actually stay longer and do their own add on time. So develop a very good relationship with preparation is so helpful in getting the highest potential, the highest quality results. Can't have any ego, free from any real desire for external show or outcomes, but really enjoying that pursuit of quality preparation for its own sake. So I'm going to end there and see if there's anything anyone here, there, everywhere wants to share at this point. And again, we are recording, so if you want to put it in chat, you're welcome to. If you want to speak, you're also, of course, welcome to, according to your comfort. And if those here want to share anything. While that's going on, I'm sure Nora is looking up the theme for next week. That was preparation.
Preparation, yeah, when you mentioned to build that relationship with the good, um, it's really kind of awakening, that much importance giving, realizing the importance of having that prepare first before doing anything. I think why maybe don't like to do is there's a lot of resistance probably, and then time it takes, to prepare, and yeah, sometimes could be laziness.
Let's be honest.
But for that to overcome, I think we need to really realize the importance of how beneficial it is to improve. When you mentioned the example of spending 90% of the time in sharpening, and then in one stroke you can cut the tree. So it's really really important to practically have that awareness that how important it is, in whatever action I'm doing. Maybe I need to understand further that how can I always have that habit of preparing myself even before, like, before I was about to say, like, maybe when we create a pure thought is a consciously creating a thoughts, probably that takes some preparation. So to do with that, I think it's very very important. Thank you.
Anyone else want to share?
I guess I was reflecting on, spiritually speaking, um, ideally preparation is enjoyable. And perhaps maybe for some it doesn't feel like it's enjoyable. Like maybe it's a sign that maybe there's something off in terms of what I'm preparing. But on a physical level, yeah, this is, I don't want us to digress, but I wonder if all preparations are meant to be meaningful. But it seems like that would really, otherwise, it feels like it's a waste of time if you don't feel like it's valuable at all. So it does feel like there needs to be some sort of understanding and impact. Otherwise, no one does wants to do anything that's meaningless. And at the end of the day, I think it's just because there's no feeling of meaning. And if there was a feeling of meaning, perhaps maybe individuals would naturally feel they spend the time for that.
Mm. What spirituality shows us when we use the word meaningful, meaningful is actually quite directly linked to what do I experience to be valuable, an attainment. That's what meaningful means for every soul is. And it's very different. Every soul finds different things an attainment or valuable. And I was thinking a lot about the soul over here. Brahma Baba, the first student, he had a deep love for preparation. What he found valuable was quality, highest quality. Sometimes we use the word character when we are referring to quality of the self. So he had a deep appreciation for quality of the self or character. So he really enjoyed preparation because character, developing quality of self is a very internal, quiet activity. And everything, he always was preparing for everything. You know, we have stories about, or even now still, okay, if you're going to give a lecture, and this is a deep training, I know for me, I know it doesn't look like I probably look like I'm winging it, but before any time speaking, I always prepare to make sure I have a main thesis. You know, he'd always say, make sure that you write down or the points that you want to share. Don't speak from a paper, speak from your heart, but take that time to prepare or organize the thoughts. What's your main thesis? You know, I always make sure I know what my main thesis is, even if it's a second before I speak. What's the point here? What is the point? And so, really, brilliant at preparation. This organization was built on a deep love for preparation. The first 14 years, of this organization was completely, pretty much invisible, incognito, in terms of preparing the soil for what now is an international, worldwide organization, the largest spiritual organization in the world, run by women. It's massive. And it came. That was not where it was looking at. What it was looking at was preparing that foundation. So I really appreciate that kind of love, understanding nothing of quality will happen if there isn't quality at a very deep, invisible level. Nothing of quality will be expressed. And so I have a love. It's again based on self respect, a love for experiencing that quality within, not for show, but just because then I know it's authentic, it's real. So those were very important to Brahma Baba, was to take the time to ensure that it's real, it's honest, it's sincere, it's authentic at that invisible level. So perhaps we'll end the last few minutes with some reflection. When it comes to the self and creating a life of quality for the self, where I actually want to focus is not outwards, but I want to focus inwards on the quality of the self. I prepare for a quality of life by looking at the quality of the self, the quality of my thoughts towards the self. What types of thoughts do I have about the self? And are they based on self-respect? Have I taken time to develop that foundation of self-respect, such my thoughts towards the self are very pure, and the thoughts I create come from a very pure place? Taking time before thinking about anything in my outer world to focus on the thoughts towards the self. Are they thoughts of self-respect? Om Shanti. So we will conclude there. Our topic next week is energized. Doesn't that sound exciting? You want to get a healthy meal before that one. Thank you so much for joining today, and perhaps we'll see you again next weekend. Be aware as well, we have drop-in meditation during the week. You can get all the details on everything happening online through our website. But thank you so much for joining today. Om Shanti. Bye.